Afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to the latest opposition preview show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Before I welcome on my guest, here is a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, my special guest today is a reporter reporting on everything Huddersfield Town for the Examiner Live. It is a pleasure to welcome onto the show Stephen Chicken. Afternoon, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Yes, very, very well. Albeit we had a draw against Reading on Tuesday night. Of course, your 17-match unbeaten run come to an end against Millwall. It's been a phenomenal run that you've been on. How do you think that Carlos Corberán is going to change things up, or do you think he's going to keep it very much the same and hope that players can respond?
Yeah, I think the latter, really. He's got lots of options in the squad, so there's been lots of rotation over the past few months in particular because there's good players there. You know, the results sort of speak for themselves. You mentioned the 17-game unbeaten run in the league, and they've been able to bring players in and out without results suffering. So they've got a good squad and they've got the options to do that. But I think Carlos Corberán is not a character who's going to be flapping over this. He's not going to be panicked over this. I think I suspect he'll be saying to the players, look, even Manchester City, drew against Crystal Palace at the weekend. Even the best teams lose games now and then. It happens. And it's kind of because of the way other results have gone in midweek, all the teams below Town, obviously Bournemouth fans won't be looking at sort of what's below sort of third. But Town have had a lot of weeks where if they've drawn, everyone below them has also dropped points and it's not mattered. They've sort of either gone up or stayed where they are. This week they've lost and a fair few teams below them have actually won. So it's not just looking at Bournemouth ahead of them with sort of those very faint sort of automatic promotion hopes and wondering what if, but also now looking behind and going, oh, we can't afford many more slips like this.
Yeah. Of course, we are 3 points ahead. We've got 2 games in hand. But surely Huddersfield fans have got to believe that you can do it.
Yeah, I think there's sort of cautious optimism. I think after the other night, I think there's an acknowledgement, obviously, that, if Town don't beat Bournemouth on Saturday, then that's it. It's, the second is pretty much off the table at that point. And even if they do, obviously they're relying on Bournemouth doing them a huge number of favours in other games and Town sort of basically being almost flawless. So I think it is still very faint, but people are still sort of, it's not stopping people from sort of looking at it and going, yeah, but what if, Yeah.
I'm going to have a little bit of a rant about our side and then link it back to Huddersfield as well. So one of the criticisms of Scott Parker this season is that he's only got a plan A. When plan A doesn't work or he deviates away from that, there's no real plan B. It doesn't work. And we found that on Tuesday night against Reading. We was well in control. We had Cantwell, we had Lewis Cook in the centre, controlling that game. And then he took Cantwell off. Now, initially we thought, wow, he's on a booking, he's trying to protect him. But it seems that it was more for tactical reasons. But the same can't be said for Carlos.
No, not anymore. I think we definitely would have said that last season and sort of early this season, that he has his style and he won't change it. But, you know, he'd had 2 years at Leeds. So he'd had 2 years of championship experience before as one of Bielsa's assistants. And he's now, you know, towards the end of his second season as head coach of Huddersfield Town. He'd obviously been head coach overseas as well, you know, worked in Cyprus, etc. But obviously the championship takes a bit of getting used to. And last season, I think he was very hamstrung he had quite a good first 11, but after that, the squad was really weak. It was a lot of, you know, B team players and academy lads ended up playing when they had an injury crisis second half of the season, which is why they ended up in that relegation fight. And I think we sort of interpreted his unwillingness to change things up and unwillingness to rotate last season as sort of stubbornness. But I think sort of in hindsight, looking back on it again, it's actually just that he didn't have many other options, you know?
Yeah.
They didn't have that big squad. Now they do have a bigger squad and players that they can bring in. You know, the first half of the season, again, we were sort of accusing him of stubbornness and sticking to plan A too much. But from about sort of November onwards, basically around the time the unbeaten run started, he started bringing in more players. He was looking at more rotation options. He would, you know, he's even players like Jonathan Hogg and Harry Toffolo, who previously were undroppable. He'd never drop them if they were fit. Even they have had rests recently, and the side hasn't sort of suffered from them coming out of the side. So the two that are sort of untouchable at the moment really are Sorba Thomas and Lewis O'Brien. But if plan A doesn't work, he can find a plan B. You know, we saw, I think in sort of specifically recently they played Cardiff, for instance, and they were 1-0 down against Cardiff and ended up winning that game 2-1 because, you know, he wasn't afraid of taking bold decisions. He took off defensive players to put on attacking players. He changed his shape a lot. From one game to the next, we don't know what formation he's going to use because he's got about 3 of them that he can go through. And probably until Millwall in midweek, we would have said he'd picked the right formation for each game and picked the right personnel for each game. So, yeah, he's been quite impressive in that regard over the past, well, just over the whole season, really.
And that's one thing that concerns me is if we do go 1-0 up in this game, like we did on Tuesday night against Reading, are we going to sit back? Are we going to defend? Because let's be fair, Huddersfield are a better side than Reading. And yeah, how many goals did you score against them this season? I think it was 8, wasn't it?
8 this season, yeah. Conceded 3 in one of those games, to be fair, but still.
Yeah, but it really does show if we sit back on a 1-0 lead, we are going to get beat, aren't we?
Yeah, they're quite good at coming from behind this season, which they certainly weren't last year. And there was sort of, this is a long time ago now, but there was a phase back in sort of December where weirdly Town looked a lot better when they were behind than when they were ahead. Their problem earlier this season, and unfortunately we sort of saw it last week again in the FA Cup against Forest, and even more sort of alarmingly against West Brom in the league, that when they can be a bit vulnerable when they've taken the lead. You know, they had a few games in sort of November, December where they took a 1-0 lead and then got battered and ended up drawing 1-1. It happened quite a few times. And, you know, against Forest last week, they were 1-0 up in the FA Cup and ended up losing 2-1. Against West Brom last week, they were 2-0 up going into the last 10 minutes and ended up drawing 2-2. So it's a funny one because we've got 2 people here who are sort of saying they hope their side don't score first.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And to be fair, that's the thing that, you know, worries me about this game is if we do go ahead, Parker sits back. There's been lots of rumblings of discontent, even though we are second from the Bournemouth faithful. That, you know, that.
Yeah, I
we're
get that. You
we're
want to be
worried.
well clear, don't you? You want to be up there with Fulham, not looking at whether third might catch you, even if it's only sort of a little bit of a. It would take a bit of a swing for that to happen. You want to be free and clear at this stage of the season, don't you?
Yeah, most definitely. When we had the opportunities to do it, so we drew against Peterborough.
Yeah.
We've drawn against Reading. We beat Derby. Out of the three of those, you would say the Derby game is probably the toughest.
Yeah. I mean, we'd played Peterborough just before you did. And Town Peterborough were the worst team we've seen this season. So, I mean,
Yes, yeah.
I presume they put in a much better display at Bournemouth. But I mean, Town beat them 3-0 and Town didn't even play particularly well. They sort of didn't get out of second gear all games. So, yeah, it was real surprise when you looked at sort of Bournemouth's fixtures to see them dropping so many points. And the thing we've been a bit surprised by is that Scott Parker has been quite open about saying, I think the players are feeling the pressure, which isn't something I would expect a manager to say, particularly, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's something that Fulham fans warned us of, is that he didn't have that plan B. You might say that you didn't get out of second gear and you beat them 3-0. I don't think we got out of first against Peterborough. And against Reading on Tuesday night, probably got into third gear, was all over them. At half time, thought, well, this could be 4-5-0. They're not particularly very good. And then just completely sat back and let a poor side just run rings around us. One player you've already mentioned, actually, is Lewis O'Brien. He's only 23 years old. And this is one thing that stands out to me of the Huddersfield team, is the flexibility. So he's played in midfield, he played in defence. How important is he?
He's hugely important. He's their best player and has been since they've come back down to the Championship. He is best as a central midfielder. Like, I always sort of compare him to N'Golo Kante is the comparison I'd make. He's like two players off the ball, really good at driving with the ball. He can carry it forward. He doesn't score many goals. He doesn't get a huge number of assists. He's actually got quite a good shot on him, but he's one of those players who you'd back to score from 20 yards more than you would from 10 kind of thing. But he doesn't get tired. He's constantly full of running. His tackling is excellent. His dribbling is excellent. You mentioned his versatility there. He has played on the wing recently. I think basically just as a way of getting other midfielders in behind him. He played as number 10 in midweek, which I don't think especially worked, because for me, I want to see Lewis O'Brien running at defenders, not sort of sitting between the lines waiting to receive passes. But I mean, he's a hugely talented player. Very, very hardworking, very honest, and it's been a theme basically all season. Every single team has done the thing where they will take turns fouling him so that no one gets sort of sent off, because the only way to stop him at the moment is to foul him. He'll just take it past you otherwise. So, no, he's a hugely important player. It's incredible that a Premier League club hasn't come for him, because we expected him to go last summer and he stayed. We worried about whether he might go in January and he stayed. So, we're just enjoying him while he's here, really.
Do tell us a little bit more about the highlights of that 17-match unbeaten run, because do strike fear into us, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, they were quite defensively solid. Even at the start of the season, they got a whole new back line in and a new goalkeeper. So they've had Matty Pearson came from Luton. He's been excellent. Tom Lees from Sheffield Wednesday has been so calm and collected. He's barely put a foot wrong. Levi Colwill came on loan from Chelsea. He's had injuries sort of second half of the season and has been sort of in and out the side. But first half of the season, he was magnificent considering he's 18 years old. He looked like he'd been playing Championship football for 10 years. And Lee Nichols, the goalkeeper, has been the best keeper in the league. If you look at, and that's not just us saying that, if you look at the stats, you watch him play, he's been incredible. Even against Millwall on Wednesday evening, they lost 2-0, and universal agreement that they probably should have lost it 4 or 5-0. But he pulled off 3 incredible saves once again. But it's his command of the area more than his saving ability that sort of catches the eye with him. So that's been sort of the big thing they've had all season, is because they had the worst defense in the league last year. It's been quite a turnaround. But first half of the season, they weren't scoring too many goals from open play. They were very, very reliant on set pieces. They've got Sorba Thomas and Danel Sinani, a right footer and a left footer, who can take corners and free kicks and put really good balls in. Particularly Sorba Thomas's deliveries have been sensational this season. But they weren't scoring many goals from open play until sort of November. And then suddenly they've sort of hit their stride and they've scored them in more games than not. So, you put those things together, you look at the XG tables and they should be ninth, etc., etc. But when you go game by game, that Millwall game was the first time for months they've been battered since we played Bournemouth back in October.
Yeah.
It's the first time they've had sort of that big expected goal difference against them. They've not really had big expected goal difference the other way either, is the thing. But when you've got a goalkeeper who's defined the stats at one end and a striker in Danny Ward at the other who's defined the stats in a goal scoring sense, you're going to end up winning a lot of games that maybe on paper should be draws.
How do you reckon this is going to go, Stephen? Because considering we've had that disappointing result on Tuesday, we're not in the greatest of form. I don't know if you was aware of the games beforehand. We can never beat Preston. Never beat Preston.
Yeah,
So
lost from 1-0 up there, didn't you? That was remarkable.
Yes, yeah. But we managed to beat Blackpool and Stoke, but they weren't particularly great games. It was a case of being 1-0 down and a late smash and grab, to be fair. 2 late goals in both. So considering we're not in particularly good form, do you think we'll raise our game? And how do you think it's going to go?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, as I say, you look at those Scott Parker comments, and I think if I was a different kind of journalist, I'd be trumpeting those a lot more.
Yeah.
But, saying the pressure's getting to them. But, I think it's a really tough, high-pressure game for both sides. Both are worried about their positions. But, Town would love to get into the automatic promotion places, obviously. But I think more than that at the moment, it's, for the love of God, let's make sure we hold on to a promotion place at least. So even if, they were to beat Bournemouth and then Bournemouth win all of their 3 games in hand, that's it over. But at least they've got those 3 points in the bag going into, because they're running a really tough run of games at the moment. They've still got Luton to come, who are the best team in the division since sort of the start of December. They've got QPR and Middlesbrough to play over Easter weekend. So they've got really tough games coming up. 4 of the top 7 still to play, including Bournemouth. So with the team sort of closing in from below, time is sort of running out, and they need to sort of get back to where they were. And yourself, you can win 10 games in a row, and then if you lose one, you go into the next game going, oh, I don't know if we'll win this. And that's sort of where we are at the moment, because they didn't play well against Millwall at all. Worth saying, Millwall were superb, to be fair, on Wednesday night. They were really, really excellent. But that is also the worst we've seen Town play since November, when they last lost in the league. So, long-winded way of saying, I sort of agree. I think it could be quite a tense game. I think it is going to come down to sort of, it's a horrible cliche to use. It's not the kind of thing I'd normally say, but I think it does come down to who can handle the pressure best and who can sort of keep their heads best, because we have seen Town be very sloppy over the last couple of games. One of the goals they gave away against West Brom was just a needless giveaway of the ball in their own half. And the first goal they gave away against Millwall, same thing. They gave the ball away in their own half under no pressure whatsoever and allowed them to come and attack them. So it's, I think it's going to be moments like that are going to sort of define this game. And it's down to which side is going to make those costly mistakes, really.
I'm really worried about it. I've got to be honest. I've got to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised, based on what we're saying, if we go 1-0 up and end up getting beat 2-1.
Yeah,
and
saying the other way, genuinely saying the other way as well. I mean, I think probably the smart money is on a draw, and a draw I think is probably a lot better for Bournemouth than it is for Huddersfield, in truth, just because of the fixtures we've still got. I know you've obviously got the games in hand, but I think Huddersfield have more to lose here, not just as I say, in terms of chasing second, but in terms of the playoffs. So. It's a really interesting one. It's going to be close to a sellout. It's going to be the biggest attendance Town have had since for about 3 years. Obviously, a lot of that was behind closed doors, but I think the home game against Leeds was last time they had a sellout in 2019, and I think they're hoping for a sellout or as close to it as they can get. It's a tenner a ticket, obviously. I assume Bournemouth have sold out their allocation or close
Yes,
to it.
most of it.
So, yeah, it's going to be a really good atmosphere, really big match feeling, it feels like.
Let's talk about the playoffs, actually. Let's end on that. Because, of course, Huddersfield have got a phenomenal record in the playoffs. Are you quite excited, if you didn't get automatic, of what could be again?
They've got promoted out of all three divisions after drawing 0-0 in the finals. So they have lost a couple as well. They lost one to Peterborough in 2011. Lost 3-0 at Old Trafford, which was really disappointing under Lee Clark. So they're not flawless in the playoffs. I think someone said to me yesterday, I think sort of some fans treat getting to the playoffs almost as if you've been promoted, and you've not. You've just got a shot at it. So, I think it is a bit of a lottery. There's some really, really good teams in there, and it's weird. People always talk about, getting into form and hitting your stride going into the playoffs, but Huddersfield were in awful form going into the playoffs in 2017 and ended up getting promoted. That they really limped over the line because they were in a very, very strong position and ended up sort of limping over the line and then ended up going up. But you look at Middlesbrough, their record against the big teams is really good. So I almost might fancy them if they got into a place. You've got Blackburn and QPR, who are they're in decline. They're really struggling second half of the season, but are just about hanging on in the top six. You've got Millwall, they're absolutely rampant at the moment. They're in the best form in the division. They've won 6 of the last 8 and drawn the other 2. Sheffield United, since Paul Heckingbottom took over, have been excellent, although they've, similar to Bournemouth, had a few unexpected wobbles recently. Forest, since Steve Cooper went in, have been superb. So it really is a bit of a crapshoot. You can look at Huddersfield's undefeated run in their second half of the season, the fact that they're third, and say maybe they're favourites, but I don't think it's as simple as that, unfortunately.
And the team that stand out to me, and this is why I'm dreading if we drop out of the automatic spots and into the playoffs and have to go through that, because of course we looked like it was all going well last season. Was winning 1-0, went to Brentford and the wheels just fell off, unfortunately. Went a man down, needless tackle. The other team that jumps out to me is Luton, and Luton are dangerous. But I don't think I'd fancy you guys in the playoffs either.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's one of the. I think it would be almost impossible for Bournemouth and Huddersfield to meet in the playoffs. I remember, obviously, they played in the playoffs in League One in, I think it was 2011.
It was, yes,
went penalties, wasn't it? It was 3-3 at the John Smith. So I was at that game as a. I'm not a Huddersfield fan, but I took my wife because there are still tickets. I thought, we'll go to that. It was a great game. Not for you, obviously, but no, I agree on Luton. Every time since, it's like when Town were just about to be, they had that awful second season in the Premier League where they were basically relegated from November onwards, and the sort of the gallows humour from the fans was to chant Luton Town away when it became apparent that Luton were coming up from League One, and that sort of chant isn't so funny anymore because since then they've not beaten Luton once. Every time we played Luton, they've been so hardworking, so organised. I think Nathan Jones has obviously done a fantastic job sort of over his 2 spells there, and their recruitment has been sort of, unless you've got sort of the means of a Fulham or a Bournemouth, Luton Town is the model to follow in terms of recruitment. And I think Huddersfield are trying to put themselves in that conversation as well. But Luton's recruitment over the past sort of 4 or 5 years has been sensational. And I think they're getting, they're not there by accident. I think some people are snobby about them because, Kenilworth Road is what it is. Looks like it's someone built it in Roller Coaster Tycoon. But it's they're really, really good, solid side. And as I say, I've not looked at the update table, but I know when I looked at it a couple of weeks ago, they picked up more points per game than anyone since the beginning of December, more than Fulham. So I think they're really dangerous at the moment.
Yeah,
and we've still got to
and
play him, which is fun.
have you? We've played them twice. One at home, got beat away. So yes, hopefully we'll avoid them, and hopefully probably avoid you guys if we do both end up in the playoffs. But I've got to agree. I don't think. I
It'll be
think
one or
of
the
us
other
is
of
gonna,
us for second, isn't it? Yeah. And I think
yeah,
let's be honest, it's in Bournemouth's hands, very much so. So, as I say, I think sort of Town fans are being cautiously optimistic, but I think even the most optimistic ones, the ones who are sort of losing their heads over the potential second, would have to admit if they don't win on Saturday, that's it done. It's playoffs then.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
No worries. Thank you.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll both be celebrating come May, but after Saturday, So all the very, very best after Saturday.
Yeah, cheers. I mean, looking forward to the reception Phil Billing's going to get as well. So,
yeah, it is his first game back after suspension as well. So,
right. Well, there we go. Well, he scored last time, but it's behind closed doors. He's obviously. I don't think Town fans have seen him since he went to Bournemouth, have they? In the flesh, maybe. But no, I mean,
don't think so.
The way. I don't think they have, because the games he's played have been behind closed doors, and when we played you, it was home fans only last season. So, although I suppose they would have seen him at the reverse fixture, wouldn't they? But it's his first time back to the John Smiths in front of fans. That's they're not big fans, as you know. I think, to be honest, I think entirely unfairly. But there we go.
Yeah. Well, you never know. It might fire him up, but we shall see. We shall see. But thank you again so much, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all the very best after Saturday.
Yes, same.
Yeah. Cheers. Great stuff. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this opposition preview show. Do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Please do remember to check out our interviews with the likes of Harry Redknapp, Steve Cook, Steve Fletcher, Effa Nakuku, Andy Burnell, Beth Powney, Liv Blizzett. There's loads of them on there. Also, do check out, I know the game has already gone, but do check out our interview that we did before the Reading game with boxer and British and Commonwealth champion Michael Sprott.